Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Art of the Dog. Tonight I have another guest, a great guest, somebody who I really needed to have on the show, Michelle. And Michelle is our German Shepherd expert, because God knows I am not the German Shepherd expert. So let me ask you, how many breeds of German Shepherd are there? Just one?
There's just one breed of German Shepherd. We have different lines or types inside the German Shepherd breed. We have different types of shepherds. Lately, they've really broken off. They have like Shiloh Shepherds. They have the King Shepherd, which all look pretty much like a larger German Shepherd. Then you have Belgian Malinois, which are not even a German Shepherd. They're a Belgian breed. And there's three types of the Belgian dogs that are similar, but the most common one we see here is a Belgian Malinois. As far as German Shepherds go, there's just one breed of a German Shepherd with different lines or types inside that.
Okay, now a German Shepherd, most people think when they look at a German Shepherd and they think of the German Shepherd, they think guard dog.
Yes.
And what they are forgetting is, it's right in the word, they're shepherds.
Yes.
They're herding dogs. Originally?
Yes.
And then developed, correct?
Yes, they were later, they're very versatile. They're probably one of the most versatile breeds. We see them in protection work. We see them in law enforcement. We see them in search and rescue. We see them in service work with helping the blind and doing service for the disabled. They're very versatile breeds, so they've kind of streamed off. But with inside that, there's the different lines make a difference too. With whether you
Okay, great. So we have a German Shepherd breed.
Yes.
Tell us about the different lines.
We have an American show line and an American working line. We have the Western German show line and the Western German working line. We have an Eastern line, which is more of a working type breed of its own. They were bred to be predominantly a military dog for Eastern Germany when the war was going on.
Okay, so that's the German Shepherd that we see in the old World War II movies, right?
You would probably, I would have guessed. I mean, there's still the Western side of that, where they have a working line as well. But the Eastern dogs are almost like him with the flat back, bigger head, but they're more aloof. They're predominantly a working dog.
Does anybody still use German Shepherds for being a shepherd, for herding?
Yes. He works with me on a horse farm. His natural instincts get the better of him way too often. He was never trained as a herding dog. It's instinct, it's innate in him. Like, he wants to get behind and drive the horses.
By the way, when Michelle says she's talking about our other co-host. This is Blaze. Blaze is Michelle's dog, and they do work together. So back to the line. So let's say I want a German Shepherd for a pet. What should I be thinking?
I would really get with a good breeder. And there's a big discrepancy with breeders of good breeder. People think a pet store, a good breeder would never ever sell to a pet store.
Good to know.
You will see if you start researching German Shepherds and breeders, the breeders who devote their life, that they do it because they want to further the well-being of the breed, is a good breeder. Someone who takes two of the same type and breed them together to get puppies is not a good breeder. Just for the sake of having puppies or for the money. They don't care about all the health, hereditary problems that go into the dog itself. And that causes people a lot of heartache. You're going to pay more money for a well-bred dog, but it's going to save you down the road. German Shepherds are known for hip issues. They're known for DM, shoulder. They have a lot of hereditary problems with inside the bloodline. So your good breeders test genetically to make sure they're not furthering those genetic deficits into the bloodline. Whereas someone who doesn't care, they're breeding all sorts of things. Over in Europe, they do like Schutzland or IPO, where they test a dog conformationally, their temperament, their tracking, their abilities, their protection. They want a well-rounded German Shepherd.
When they want a well-rounded German Shepherd, are they leaning toward the working dog?
A lot of times with an aside, if you go on some breeder sites, you'll see the list dog is high energy, moderate, or low energy. The low energy dog would be more suitable for a pet. Most German Shepherds who do Schutzhund are well temperament. They have a real decent level head. They're not, whereas some of the American lines that I've been seeing as training clients, they're nervous, they're jittery, they are very aloof, they're not stable mentally. I don't know about physically, but I'm gonna make the assumption that they have hereditary problems as well. But a good breeder would never breed two nervous dogs together to further that nervousness on. German Shepherds are supposed to have like a pretty nerves of steel, not fearful. And a lot of times in Shepherds, the fearfulness turns into like what people would think of as aggression. And it's more, I think, I can honestly say like the last 9 Shepherds that I worked with were all fear-based. And they were all young dogs, from 10 months to 2 years old. And I will tell you that a lot of trainers do not want to work with German Shepherds. They'll tell the owners just put them down. And it's not the case. It does not need to be.
Yes, it's just not stuck with the German Shepherds. Most of the dogs that I deal with who appear to have aggression, I always, probably 100% of the time, find that aggression is fear-based. Okay, so I'm going to cut these guys some slack. Just because your German Shepherd is aggressive or appears to be aggressive doesn't mean it can't be fixed. It can, especially if you have somebody who's versed and an expert on German Shepherds like our guest Michelle. And that's really why I have you here today, is to dispel a lot of the ill feelings that people have on German Shepherds. I myself have worked with a lot of German Shepherds who I found very much a challenge. And trying to understand this dog, where it's coming from, why is it behaving. I just worked a case recently, and I'm referring it to you, but this German Shepherd did something that I've never had a dog do to me before. It charged me at least 5 times while I was working with the dog. And when I say charge, I mean like a grizzly bear charges. And it came from maybe 20 yards out and a full run right at me and stopped right in front of me. And I didn't know what was gonna happen. Fortunately, I can say we got along, but not great. You know, this charge was rather unnerving. And there was a point where when I was working with the dog on leash that he did grab a hold of my sleeve. And that's kind of, we terminated the session for a whole day. And I came back the next day to work with the dog, and it went a lot better. I think we were kind of unnerving one another, the dog and I. So that's why it was a good idea to take a break, and we started the next day. I really liked the dog, but I didn't understand the dog. Well, I have a couple of questions. I can direct these either to Michelle or Blaze, either or one. Anybody wants to answer, that's fine by me. But the first question is, how does anybody go about finding a good breeder? It seems to be more difficult all the time.
It is. And I tell people, you know, now with the internet, you can definitely do your Google searches and look. But if you find a breeder who's breeding German Shepherds, Labradors, Goldens, and 10 other breeds, I would keep on moving along. If they're German Shepherds and the amount of knowledge they have on the breed's a good indicator, so call them up. You can interview people like you're interviewing someone for a job. Ask them how long you've been breeding. Do you genetically test your dog for the defects in the bloodlines? What do you do with your dogs? What do your dogs? Are they working line? How much energy? Are the parents there? You do want to meet the parents. And I know there's a lot of times maybe they just have the mother. But you can get a good indication too of how the mother is, if the father's there, if the dogs are nervous. There are a couple of clients lately, it's like, oh, the parents were nervous. I'm like, well, then you want to know why you have a nervous dog? Not only the puppies were around these nervous dogs through the developmental time, but that's how they learned. You know, and it's genetic, probably in the line, like we have nervous people, you can get nervous dogs. talk to the breeders. And a good breeder is not going to hand their puppy off just to anybody. So if they're really like, oh, $500, your dog, I would go look somewhere else. A lot of times the good breeders will start a dog, and then if their show or if it's IPO Schutzland, and like maybe this dog's not right for breeding or this dog's not right to do this, they will sell them at like maybe a year old. To me, that's perfect. It's a year old, they're still young enough, but you're through the puppy stages where there's no potty training, there's no chewing, and you get a better idea of who the dog is going to be. But most of the time I tell people, really talk to the breeders. A couple of the good breeders I know, they have an application they make people fill out, and they ask a lot of questions. And some people think that's intrusive, but it's smart, because they're going to say, yes, you're right for my dogs. No, you're not right for my dogs. And that's what you want. A breeder who's just going to push the dog out the door just to make the sale is not a breeder you want to buy a dog from. No. It's not. And I know a lot of breeders who will deny owners, like, no, I don't think you're right. And people get offended, but it's for the better. They'll go buy a cheaper puppy somewhere else. And unfortunately, during the whole COVID, people were buying these dogs from the Amish or from puppy mills. And now they have a dog who's like a year old or younger who has a lot of problems. And they're not necessarily, they're inbreeding. They grow up out in a kennel. They grow up without a lot of social contact or stimulation. I've had a lot of puppies who don't even know what grass is. So now you're gonna bring them home and kind of transition them over to the grass. So you're starting out at like a -10. So you're better suited to go with a breeder who has the knowledge, you can ask them, why do you breed this dog? And if you get the answer, because I love the breed and I wanna enhance it and I wanna make it better, that's who you wanna start leaning towards.
Is the American Kennel Club helpful as far as breeders, or do they just don't care?
I personally, I'm not, to me, having papers from the AKC is not tremendous. I think we could all of us in this room could become breeders tomorrow and have no credentials behind it. I could go buy a purebred German Shepherd from a puppy mill that comes with AKC papers. And to me, I think that's horrible. I don't agree with that. I think the AKC should require them to do genetic testing in order to have registration and to breed. I think these dogs should have to be doing the IPOs and just more than just pretty face. There's a lot of pretty face German Shepherds, but they have horrible hips. They have, elbow issues. They're prone to DM. There's a whole line of things they could be prone to, and nobody's stopping this breeder from continuing to breed it. And unfortunately, these people get the dogs home, they fall in love with them, they spend years with them, and then they're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on vet bills, only to be putting the dog down by the time it's 3, 4, or 5 years old.
We talked and touched on dogs that grow up with problems, hip problems, elbow problems, genetic problems, even too much fear type of thing. Is there anything that we can do to try to be suspect of any type of a breed? Or is there anything that we can look for in a pup? Or even if it's a dog that's a year old, is there something we should be looking at?
And most importantly, it would come from the breeder. The breeders who really want a healthy line will genetically test for a lot of these issues. They'll do like hip x-rays on their breeding dogs, that they aren't with like hip dysplasia, they don't have elbow dysplasia, they don't have some of the health issues that are more prone. They're trying to breed that out. I think it was very interesting with the doodles, the golden doodles, the labradoodles that are so popular. The man who developed the breed actually worked for like the guiding eye dogs, and what he wanted was the lab golden temperament and the ability to bond with the poodle's coat for people with allergies, which they're not completely hypoallergenic, but they're less than like a dog like him who sheds their dander and their hair. So he tried doing the poodle, and the poodle didn't quite cut it with temperament all the time. So he wanted back the golden in the lab. And he wrote this like real awesome letter how he regretted even starting a labradoodle or a golden doodle. And what he went on to say was that people were now doing is they weren't watching what they were putting together. They were taking the labs with all the health issues, all the goldens with the health issues, crossing them in to be with the poodles, so they were furthering a lot of these genetic issues that were causing the problems and the heartache for their owners. Instead of being like, we're going to start a new breed of dog, let's do it responsible. Let's make sure we're only using well-bred labs that have no hip dysplasia, or Goldens that have no hip dysplasia or elbow dysplasia, or some of the other more issues prone to those breeds. So you just wanted to further a lot of these issues. And same thing with temperament. Instead of breeding a well-balanced, happy lab or golden, they were using fearful, scared dogs, which breeds back into a more unstable dog as well. And if you look all over the internet, you have a doodle for everything now. There's even shepherd doodles, but nobody's watching what they're breeding. It's just what I have in the backyard. It's going to make me money, so let's breed them. And to me, I've taken dogs that rescued, put my heart and soul into them, and lost them because of health issues that was genetic. Nothing to do with the circumstances they came from, but from bad breeding. And I take a lot of puppy mill mamas and the dogs that came from puppy mills that are damaged, and they have a lot of health issues that are genetic. And to me, it's heartbreaking to see these dogs that are so destroyed, so beat down, so sick, bring them back and then only to lose them a short time later because their hips are so bad, or they are more prone to other like epilepsy or heart disease, or in a lot of the breeds, almost all your purebreds have some issue that's more curtailed to their breed. And to me, that's heartbreaking.
So I'm Joe Public, and I don't know anything, and I'm listening to the rhetoric that's out there. Go stay away from the breeders, or stay away from the puppy mills, or whatever. Go get a dog from the shelter, for God's sakes. You got all these dogs out there. So I go to the shelter. What should I be looking out for? What's going to be problematic? What's going to cost me? Is there anything I can look for that's not going to cost me thousands of dollars down the road because I fall in love with this animal and now it's got major vet problems?
So, and I hear a lot being a rescue, a lot of people get kind of discouraged with rescues because there's such a process to go through an adoption process. They do reference checks, vet checks, home checks. And I tell people, like, if you're applying for a dog, they don't know who you are. You could be, you're not going to have an animal abuser say, oh yes, I abuse animals. Can I adopt a dog from you? No, they're going to present themselves as a very upstanding, responsible person. So when people do background checks, it's like 3 references they normally ask. They just want to know, like, who am I going to give this dog to that they have already invested a lot of time, training, and money into. They want to talk to your vet. Like, do you provide vet care? The vet can give you a lot about your past. And if, a lot of times I know one of the famous was, how many dogs have they had? Also, the vet tells me they've had 10 dogs, but on your application, you've put down 1. There's a reason why you're not being honest with us. They're private rescues or the individual rescues. These dogs live in their homes with their volunteers. So they're with their kids, they're with their other dogs. So they can honestly, a foster family can tell you, yes, this dog is suitable to live with kids. No, this dog is not suitable to be around other dogs. You get a lot more than a dog that's just been at a shelter. If people are worried about that, go to the private rescues. It's a little bit of it's not even that horrible of a headache. They're just trying to ensure that they're protecting their dogs. For their adoption fee, you get a dog who's fully vetted, it's spayed, it's neutered. So you're not going to have that initial cost of having to come up with all hundreds of dollars for the vetting. So through even the shelters, they come pretty much vetted and spayed and neutered. So you get a huge cost out of the way. The only difference with the private rescues, these dogs go into people's homes and they live with them so they can tell you what the dog is like. A lot of dogs in stressful situations aren't going to present who they really are. In rescue, we say 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months as the dog unfolds. And it's like 3 days to decompress, 3 weeks to start to kind of get its bearings, 3 months you kind of start to see who they really are. So if you just go grab a dog, I've seen some dogs come out of horrible situations. They're shell shocked. They've been in a shelter and they feel the stress, they feel the pain. So they're terrified. They get home, they're a whole different dog, and a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden a whole other side comes out. But if they've been living in a foster home, they've had time to kind of decompress, to go through, the motions and see who this dog really is and see if there is going to be a health issue. So I tell people that would be the best way to go. There are a lot of shelters throughout the country that are still kill shelters. And a lot of times those are where our rescues here get their dogs from. So they are saving the dogs. The one thing I don't like to hear people say to me is, well, I got this dog from a puppy mill, but I figured I was saving him. I'm like, well, did you give the man money? Oh, yeah. Well, then you're not saving anything because that keeps him going. And unfortunately, the way things are set up agriculturally and with laws, these puppy mills can keep on going and going and going and going as long as you're funding them. And so every puppy you buy, you're funding them. So that's how they kind of play off your sympathies. Well, oh yeah, you're gonna feel sorry for the dog, so you're gonna take it home. And then it keeps it going. You might not see the suffering from that puppy, but the parents are suffering. So that's not rescuing. And I think there's a big distinction there. You are not rescuing if you go pay someone who's a puppy mill money for their dog.
Puppy mills are a very sad state in this country, and I'd like to see them all illegal. I'd like to see them all banned. But until then, the best thing that we can do is, well, even at the shelter in Wyoming County, we accept the older dogs from puppy mills because the breeders are just going to euthanize them. And if we take them, at least we can give them a great life for their senior years. And a lot of these dogs, that's why I brought up the bark yet, because a lot of the dogs that we bring in don't bark. It takes a year or so for them to bark. They've never been on grass before. They don't know how to interact with other dogs. I actually put a pack walk together because a friend of mine had one of these breeders, and this dog was walking with us, finally, but would have nothing to do with the other dogs. And I noticed this dog never used its nose, never sniffed. So we had a big old blue-nosed pit bull that was having a great time with the rest of the pack walk, which was a chocolate lab and my Weimaraner and even a small Yorkie dog. Well, I hooked her up, this breed, this victim of a breeder, and hooked her up with the blue-nosed pit bull, and he just took off with the rest of the dogs with her connected. Well, this poor thing thought she was gonna die, you know, her eyeballs went, what the? So I think it lasted 30 seconds when we took the leash off her, and like magic, she was just running with the rest of the pack. It was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Almost to the point where we started calling her back, and she said, I don't think so, I'm running with the dogs here. And she had a great time, but it was the first time I seen her use her nose. Okay guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Art of the Dog. This was really exciting having my German Shepherd expert here, Michalek, and her sidekick, Blaze. But anyway, this was really informative. Thank you very much for coming. This is great to have you. I certainly hope we'll have you back again, because you know what? When I'm with you, I'm always learning.
Oh, thank you, Tom. I enjoyed it.